Growing up, my dad would often take me fishing along the rivers, streams, and lakes of western Pennsylvania. I would get bored quickly, whether I was catching fish or not. I guess you could say I was fished out at the time. The older I got, the longer and further I was allowed away from him, and I would go on what I referred to as journeys. I loved to explore whatever places were not already discovered by me. I'd go to the top of a hill, or follow a trail, or journey around the lake we were at that day on foot, stuff like that. More often than not, whatever waterway we were near, there was or were abandoned buildings and houses and whatnot. I would go through all of them to see what was there, if anything, or hopefully find something I would consider cool or useful. A couple of times I found some very dirty magazines, both literally and figuratively speaking. Laugh out loud. I found a few spots where people partied. Beer, liquor, typical garbage. I found left behind pictures, toys, time cards, hard hats, clothing, furniture, etc. Everything just usually too old or broke. I saw a few pentagrams and burnt candles on the floors of 2 different houses through the years. Made sure to keep my distance from those places. Never found anything very exciting. At one point, my dad went fishing down at Kelly Station, lock number 6, all the time. I would always try to talk him into fishing above the dam, a little ways where a stream flowed into the Allegheny River, and there were abandoned houses of some kind. I think it was an old brick yard. It had a rusted, holey 8-foot fence, what was left of a barbed wire at the top that went around the perimeter of the abandoned establishment. Everything was made of yellow brick. It was a big place, 5 to 6 buildings that were warehouse-sized with multiple floors, 2 to 5 depending on the building, and there was a tall smokestack. One of the buildings was only half there, like they started to demo it, and then said, screw it, halfway through. My dad would always stress to not go in those buildings, because they may not be structurally sound, especially that one. I'd say, yes, Dad, and off I went, sneaking through the places, making sure my dad didn't see me enter. I never went too far into any of them, so as to make sure I could hear my dad yell for me if he wanted me to check in. Always so curious as to what was in the rest of all those yellow brick buildings. When I was old enough to drive, I went on a journey myself to see what was in them. It was the dog days of summer in the early 90s, during the middle of the day so I could see easier and had less need of a flashlight. I did have one. I drove along the railroad tracks for a mile or 2, pulled up, and parked in front of the old security gate. I entered through the security office door. I went through the smallest of buildings first. It was just offices, locker rooms, and restrooms. Next I went into the way bigger building, which had 5 floors, an elevator shaft with doors ajar at one end of the building. That was pretty big. I'd say it was 10 feet long, 20 feet wide, maybe 10 feet high. Multiple stairwells, some crumbling apart at spots. An office of sorts on each level. I went through every level. They were all the same. No walls, besides offices, on the inside. Just cement support beams, like you would find in a parking garage. At this point, I had found what was a handful of porn magazines, XXX stuff, back in the office building. Now I decided to see what was in the building that was half demolished. It was the same as the last building, but it was only half there. Looked around the first floor, then the next, and so on. It was neat, but very dumb. On each floor I walked over to the edge where the building was cut in half. A great view overlooking the river, and overlooking where you would park if you were going there. Didn't even cross my mind at the time. I got to the top floor, and I was walking over to the edge when I saw a sleeping bag. I thought to myself, I wonder what that's doing here. As I walked closer, my mind was slowly putting together what I was looking at. It looked like it had one large dark spot, about 2 feet in diameter roughly, with a bunch of spattered dark spots of something. I was still getting closer, looking at the sleeping bag puzzled. Now closer, wondering what the hell is on this sleeping bag. I then see a little yellow teddy bear that's covered in the same dried dark brown substance. Having seen a lot of crime scene pictures, I'm now starting to realize what it is. As I'm staring at the dried crap on the floor and all over the place around the sleeping bag, it reminds me of the puddle of blood that's left after you dress a deer. This is blood. Now, looking at the scene with this thought, there was easily enough dried blood splattered around and soaked into the sleeping bag to constitute a killing of something. There was no body, just blood. The whole walking up to it and realizing what I saw seemed to have taken about a minute. I left as fast as I could, not knowing exactly what I saw. Needless to say, I did not venture into the other buildings. I immediately went over to one of my friend's house. He and another of my friends were chilling there. I told them what I saw, and I implored them to come along. They agreed. From the time I left to the time I returned with two friends, it was about an hour, maybe less. Before coming back, we all grabbed something from my friend's house for protection. 2 bats and a knife, just in case. We make our way up to the top floor. I'm telling them again what I was doing on the way over to the sleeping bag. There were a few pillars in the way, so you couldn't immediately see where the sleeping bag was laying or lying, whatever. As we get to the point in the room where I know I could see it, it wasn't there. I'm thinking, what the hell? Where is it? As we started walking over towards where it had been, then I got the thought, oh shit, someone was here while I was gone, and they took or moved it. I literally almost crapped my pants. I stopped, grabbed my friends forcefully by the arms and said, let's go. They saw the fear in my eyes and came along saying, what's up, man? What'd you see? I did not answer. My friends never got close enough to see all the dried blood splatters that were on the floor. I explained to them in the car on the way back that the sleeping bag and the teddy bear were gone, and it freaked me out. We talked about it and came to the conclusion that he, she, or they were staying in the building because of the view or vantage point that it offered. You could see and hear anyone coming before they even knew you were there. Since I saw the sleeping bag, we thought that that meant the person or persons didn't know I was there or couldn't get their stuff without being seen until after I left. It wasn't there when we came back. We thought he definitely at least saw my car. Maybe me and maybe all of us. Both times there, I have never heard anything that made me think someone was creeping. I was shaken up for months over this event. Every time I heard a weird noise, I was ready to defend myself. I lived by a steel mill, so there were weird noises all the time. I told my parents what happened. They never showed that they were scared or bothered by the story in any way. Anyways, we never reported it, nothing became of it, and the buildings have been demolished for the past 20 years or so. When I go fishing around that area, I still get a bit creeped out to this day. I read about serial killers frequently, even before that happened, and I still do. With that, I thought the teddy bear was maybe a trophy. Why else would he or they take it? I could understand taking the sleeping bag, but the teddy bear covered in blood. What do your listeners think? Well, this is my true scary story. It happened when I was 7 years old. Let me begin by telling you, there was this creepy house by us that was across from my backyard. A family moved in around October, and they were kind of creepy, but for the most part, they minded their own business, so it was okay. Until about a month later, in November, I was out jumping on the trampoline my grandpa got me for on my 7th birthday. My mom was outside watching me, and everything was okay. My mom had to go inside for just a minute or two, and when she did, 2 young African males stepped out of the bushes. I hadn't noticed them there before. One was tall, the other one was shorter. The short one was carrying a basketball. Now, I loved playing basketball at school, so that kind of interested me. However, I had also been learning about stranger danger and safety at school during this time as well. The fact that this was in the early evening and it was getting dark added to the creep factor. I knew they weren't playing basketball, and the way they came out of the bushes when my mom left set my danger sensors off.
They were coming closer to me without saying anything. I started to get scared, but I couldn't run for some reason. I just stood there. Suddenly, my mom opens the back door and yells out my name. Both of the guys took off running like crazy. It was about a week later, and the creepy family in the house from across our backyard suddenly left. They just picked up and moved after only being there for about a month. We did report what happened to the police when we found out that the two African males tried to actually snatch another little girl in our neighborhood. Here's the creepy thing. It turned out that the two guys were part of the family that suddenly moved out, and the police said they were probably watching me the whole time they were there. As far as I know, they were never caught.
So let me start off by saying I'm 19 years old, and at the time of my story, I was 18. I'm only 5'8", and I weigh about 160 pounds, so I'm not that big, but I can defend myself just fine. I've been boxing since I was about 12, and started training MMA when I was 15. With that out of the way, I'll start the story. It started when I was at work. I was stocking shelves, and a friend texted me saying his car broke down and he needed a ride. Okay then, I texted him back that I was on my way. I told my boss that I was leaving, and he was fine with it. I only had about 15 minutes until my shift was over anyways. When I was walking out, I saw 3 guys standing near my car and looking at it. Dude number 1 was about 5'8", 5'9", and chubby. Dude number 2 was tall, like 6'3" or 6'5", and real skinny. Dude number 3 was about my height, 5'8", and built. Now, my car isn't anything special. It's a 2001 Monte Carlo. It's got red body paint, tinted windows, and blacked out tires. I think it's cool, but not something that usually gets much attention. I walk up to the car, and the guys look at me. Hey, you guys like the car? Dude number 2, the real tall one, spoke up. It's cool. How much did you pay for it? I responded telling him that I bought the car for $3,000 on Craigslist, and my brother did the customization and stuff on it. He just looked at me and said real quietly, "That's cool," and they all quickly walked away. I didn't think much of it. I drove over, picked up my friend, and drove him home. I drove to my small one-bedroom apartment, walked in, and almost instantly passed out because I was so tired. About 4 a.m., I heard loud thumps at the door. Not knocks, but banging thumps. It was like someone was trying to break down the door, it was so loud. I got up and I grabbed a machete that I had in my closet. I snuck up to the door and looked out the peephole to see the 3 men from earlier at my door. I decided against saying something or opening the door. After a while, they finally left. The next day, I didn't have to work, so I decided to do some errands and whatnot. It was about 7, maybe 7:30, and I got hungry, so I drove to get some food, but had to park a few blocks away since I knew traffic would be horrible in downtown Philly. After getting some food, I was walking back to my car, and I saw the same 3 men behind me. I quickly cut across the street and cut through some more streets until I found my car. I got in as fast as I could, but before I could back out of my parking space, a car pulls up into the parking lot and blocks the exit. I pulled up thinking it was nothing, expecting whoever it was to move, but they didn't. I saw the same 3 men get out of the black pickup truck and surround my car. I turned the car off and I just bolted without even locking it. I just flew open the door and slammed it and took off. I don't know why I did that, but it was either that or get jumped, fight or flight. You might think a boxer would want to fight, but I knew what I could handle. I took off. I ran far away from downtown and back to my neighborhood. After running for about an hour straight, I was just kind of speed walking. My apartment was only about 100 yards away now, but when I looked at this end of the street, there was the black pickup truck. I hid behind a garbage can and thought to myself, hopefully they won't see me. I was so tired from running and I knew I wasn't going to put up much of a fight. They rolled past me and I was finally able to get inside the safety of my apartment. Now a rational person would call the cops, which I did, but the cops couldn't do much. I was only able to tell them what the 3 men looked like and what kind of car they drove. The cops said the only thing they could be charged with was harassment.
The cop left, and I didn't feel any safer now than before. I barely got any sleep, but it felt good to lay down. I called in sick at work and just chilled at my apartment. I figured I needed to get my car back, so I mustered up the courage and left my apartment to go to the parking lot. I got there and was surprised nothing was done to my car. I got in and I saw a note on the steering wheel. It read, "We're always one step ahead." I crumpled the note up and I drove home. Then I ordered a pizza and stayed in the next day. I went into work and I did my job. My shift ended at 3:30. I drove home super freaked out because I saw a black pickup truck at a red light, but it did turn the other way. I parked my car and I was walking into my apartment building when I saw 3 men standing outside my door. I turned around and calmly turned the corner, but then I bolted. When I got outside, I didn't even grab my car, I just took off running. I heard the men behind me, one yelled, "Split up!" I was actually happy about that. I knew I could have a chance to fight them one-on-one. I kept running, cutting through some streets until I saw dude number 1. He was about the same height as me, but he was chubby. He was about 50 yards away, walking slowly. He looked exhausted. I was behind him at that point, and I carefully followed him. It was about 5 o'clock, and the only other person around was some old man on the other side of the street. I snuck up on dude number 1, and I just went crazy. I attacked him from behind, and I didn't stop. I'm not sure if I broke his nose or what, but he started bleeding profusely. I still didn't stop. I threw punches left and right as fast as I could. Eventually, he dropped to one knee, and I just remember pushing him over and holding him by the throat. "Listen, you mother, I didn't want to do this, but you made me." He laid there trying to say something, but I took off running. I was going back to my apartment, but about 2 blocks away, on the other side of the street, I saw dude number 2, the real tall one. We locked eyes, and we ran up on each other. He tried to swing at me, but luckily he missed. My counterpunch, luckily, hit him. He then grabbed me and attempted to pick me up. I'm guessing he was going to try to slam me, but he tripped, and we both fell down. We wrestled for a bit, and when I was inside, I just started throwing elbows like crazy. I honestly just kept hitting him, and he finally sat up and said, "You piece of shit." He reached behind his back. I didn't need to look. I knew it was a gun. I took off running as fast as my legs would carry me, all the way home to my apartment. Then I called the police again. When they showed up, I told them the whole story. Much to my surprise, they were already aware of most of what happened. The old man from earlier saw the fight and he called the cops. He didn't see who had started it. He did see, after I got up and took off, the man on the ground had a knife. That's why the old man called the police. Dude number 1 was arrested, and later, so was dude number 2, but not dude number 3. 1 year after all this went down, they were both sentenced. Both of them had prior convictions and warrants out for their arrest, so they got some time. Combined, they got 30 years. Dude number 2 got 13 years. Dude number 1, he got 17 years. I almost felt bad because both of the men were under the age of 23. Dude number 1 was 22 and dude number 2 was only 19 years old. But that feeling quickly went away when I remembered what they had done to me, or what they could have done if I hadn't fought them off.